Thank you, and thank you for having me today to talk about our tech transformation and how we're using it to move us into the future. So while preparing the presentation, we wanted this to be very practical. So if you're in a similar journey, if you're also navigating such a transformation, that you can take some nuggets with you and then hopefully find that content useful for your respective context. So the way we're going to go about it, we'll first look into the context and our approach. Then we'll look into some concrete outcomes that we're already seeing out of this transformation. And then we'd also like to share some of our challenges and lessons learned before we wrap things up and go to Q&A. So I'm Oscar Fernandez. I lead tech transformation and architecture at Group Asset Management at Swiss Re. What we do, so Swiss Re, it's a global reinsurer, so global presence, and then asset management specifically, that's the financial markets division of the company. So we're basically active in the financial markets, capital markets, as I mentioned. We also have a global presence. We have, besides Zurich, a very large presence here in Bratislava, and these are our offices at the Twin Cities. Besides that, we are there where you could expect from a financial institution. So we're present in London, in New York, and in Hong Kong. So that's how we are. And what do we do? I think you can visualize our value chain along two dimensions. There's the transactional piece, so everything that goes around the trading activity. So it's adding and removing positions from our portfolio, everything that follows afterwards in terms of reporting and so on. So that's a high volume, highly automated process. That's basically, I think, how you can think about it. And then the analytical dimension is what wraps things around. So we will measure the performance of our actions afterwards, but we would also use analytical before that to look into market situations, to drive our strategies, and so on. Now, getting into a bit more of the content that we're about to present today. So to understand our public cloud journey, we need to go a little bit back. You need to come with me a little bit into 2022 and then look where we were at that point. And we were coming from a successful private cloud migration. We had completed and moved our on-premise footprint into a private cloud provider. With that, we were able to leverage some of our cloud operating model characteristics. So we went DevSecOps. We also included then elasticity on our workloads. We were able to scale up and down much easier than we were in the past. And we even delivered a cost case. So moving from on-premise to private cloud made our infrastructure cheaper. So as I said, it was quite a successful project that we execute using a lift and shift approach. At the time, we were also looking at public cloud, like many of you, and there were a few things with us that resonated. We knew that going public cloud, we will have better infrastructure as a code support. We would have a much larger service catalog that we had at the time, and also better ways to scale our infrastructure. So we were looking at it. We were quite interested on it, but coming from where we were coming with the recent migration, we were not in a position to formulate a business case or a value proposition to our business that would suggest them that that was something that would do. And why was that? So I think you can group the issues along three main dimensions. The first one is, again, applying a lift and shift to something we had already migrated meant that after it, we will have pretty much the same functionality and no significant operational improvements. So in terms of like formulating a value case to the business, difficult. Not only that, but the operational complexity may even increase. We know that a public cloud is more complex than private, certainly in our experience. So without doing anything else, we were potentially entering into a terrain that was more complex, also additional concerns about security and governance and so on. So they're also not very clear why we should do this. And then on cost and local optimizations, again, moving workload that had already been optimized once, maybe delivers marginal gains, but maybe not much more than that. So we were getting into an area of maybe doing a lot of efforts with not necessarily moving the needle. Also, if you think a couple of years back, now FinOps is very established, but at the time was not. And we were also hearing and reading stories about people having problems going public cloud and having the cost under control. So that was also a concern that we had. Now, the benefits I mentioned before on public cloud were still there. So what we thought is maybe what we need to do is reframe how we're approaching this opportunity, reframe the value proposition, and address those issues. And that's what we did. So on clear business benefits, that's something you can address, and we did by having clear transformation objectives. So we are about to do this. What is it that we expect at the other end of the process? And then anything that goes into the scope needs to map directly to that. So very simple, but also clear on what the journey should take us. Then for operational complexity, we need to take one step back first. And when I look at us as an engineering organization, where we create unique value for our business is on applying domain knowledge to technology to solve business problems, and also building applications that are unique to us. Now, if you formulate the opposite to that, it means that things that we could get from the market, in particular from SaaS partners, we should leverage that and use that engineering capacity that we have to create something that is unique to our business. So the way we're addressing operational complexity is basically, as I said, but a bigger use of SaaS and platforms, as I'll come back to later. Third element on cost concerns and local optimizations, we address that by creating a reference architecture in which we position what are our tech capabilities of the future, how we get there, and then with that, avoid duplications, but also ambiguity on what platforms and technologies we use, so that we have a clear path on how we get there and what that future then looks like. If I continue a little bit more on principles, so as I said, when we create differentiation as an engineering group is on developing things that are unique to our business. So that also meant that vendor applications that we were hosting, they will need to go SaaS. So us managing the infrastructure is something where we don't create that differentiation. So the conclusion is that, so moving those applications out of the private cloud into the partners' responsibilities with SaaS. Analytics applications, at the time we were already building a common data and analytics platform. So that was we already had first use cases there and quite a data universe. So the path there was also clear. Anything of analytical nature, unless there was a clear reason to not do so, should move into the data products platform, and with that make the data available for other use cases and basically contribute to our data centricity goals. And then the last one, anything that we build ourselves, anything that moves to public cloud needs to follow new architectures. It needs to be designed and built in a way that fully leverages what we get from the cloud, so no legacy or block moves, into the public cloud. And in general, anything that you can solve with SaaS, you should. Otherwise, you can do platform and as a last resort, but then with a clear reason why we do then bespoke applications. That's from a technology perspective. Now, if you look from like a business angle, then the question is how relevant are those applications for our business? So just following, I think, a more traditional model, we mapped our applications to business capabilities, and then we presented that in a very simple way so that we could find duplications. If we have more than one application contributing to a single capability, is there a good reason for it, or is there a potential duplication we can address? And then also find things that basically had a better life, so applications that are no longer relevant for our business and that should be decommissioned. And with that, simplifying the landscape. As I said, this goes hand in hand with the reference architecture that we covered before. So those are some of our principles and how we design the transformation. Now, as I said, we're in the middle of the execution. Actually, we're quite far with it. So I just wanted to show you what it means bringing those principles to life. So we're going to look into landscape optimization first, and then I have some examples on how we are leveraging cloud to create that differentiating services. So as I said, we wanted to go public cloud, but maybe not as a lift and shift effort. And that's what resulted from looking at our landscape and also applying the principles I mentioned before. So 50% of the applications will move as a bespoke app, something that we build and maintain completely. The rest, it's either going into SaaS, into the common data platform, or is being decommissioned. What that means for us is that we can lighten our operational responsibilities. So we shift some of them to the partners, and then we can use our engineering capacity to really make the difference there where we do most for our business, but also contributing into growing our data platform. Because we looked at the whole landscape proactively, we were also able to do an exercise of assessing our tech debt. And then there, where we had bigger risks, where we had bigger opportunities, we could tackle those first in terms of like planning the roadmap and taking actions. If we now start looking at concrete use cases, so I mentioned when I introduced our value chain that we have the transactional, we have the analytical piece, and the transactional evolves around the trading activity. At the time, so a couple of years back, we had two platforms. We had one vendor platform that we were hosting ourselves, and then a SaaS one. And the reason why we had those was multiple, but basically was no full feature coverage on each of them, which then resulted also in the application of license cost, operational complexity, and so on. So what we decided was that we were going to bring everything into the SaaS one, which was already hosting the biggest part of our portfolio and also aligned with our tech strategy, and then develop a specific application in Azure that will fill the remaining functionality, but also provide full integration into the rest of our landscape. That's what we did. We did it actually together with Accenture, and they're also helping us operate the platform. And the benefits that we achieved by doing this was the obvious reduction of complexity and cost by licenses going away, platform going away, but also because we built this in a very nimble way, the infrastructure costs are very low, and also because we took a service approach, we're able to grow as we go along, and actually, as we speak, we're adding new services to this adapter, as we call it. Second example I wanted to cover is our data warehouse. So you can imagine for analytical needs and overall to manage our operations, a super important system. And our starting point here was a commercial database. So also with the business logic tightly coupled with the data store, and also using proprietary technology, which also meant that only a few of our people were qualified and able to make changes to the actual logic, to the database, if you wish. Our target state is moving fully into public cloud, also using open source. So we're moving away from vendor technologies or proprietary technologies into open source. We're using Postgres for the database, and then the services are now fully decoupled from the database, using Python as well, so we're able not only to scale, but also to change the operating model. Now, because we're using Python as the code for those services, we're able to have a larger community that contributes to those services, but we're also able to reuse that code, either things that we have built specifically for the data warehouse that we move out elsewhere for analytics, or prototypes that have been developed elsewhere that then make it into this repository. That's from a functionality perspective. From a platform, again, with this move, we're also achieving significant savings on an infrastructure level, which are north of 30%, which also being one of our larger applications, they are quite significant for us. Third case I wanted to mention, I spoke a little bit already on the before on the introduction, that's the data product. So what do we achieve with this initiative? So as I said, we're moving individual applications into this common platform. From an infrastructure perspective, it means that things as access management, security patching, infrastructure management, we only need to do it once. But the even more interesting case is at a data and consumer level. There we're able to use data that was initially curated for a single use case to bring it together, so we can also do cross-use case analysis, and then also by decoupling the data universe from the consumer zone, we can use the same data to feed a management report as it is to make that available for our data scientists to do ad hoc exercises, use cases. So we increase the use of the data, and that also drives a better quality because the usage is just higher. With this, I'll move on to the last part of the presentation, and that we covered a lot, but this was also not a straight path, so I just wanted to share some of our experiences, our challenges, and and learnings before we start wrapping things up. So if I would come to you one day and I will tell you that I would like to run a project to upgrade an application for like version X to Y, or to digitize a specific manual process in the business, that you will probably agree with me that that's much easier to visualize than a project as what we have been looking so far, which is quite broad in the formulation. Now, if that is, it's easier for you to visualize, you can imagine that is the same for your business stakeholders. And that means that there's more effort that needs to go into explaining the value and getting the buy-in from the broader organization. Not only that, but I think you need to design as well your roadmap to deliver intermediate value as you go along. So on one side, you get proof points that you're moving in the right direction, but you also can maintain that buy-in from the organization. Also, if you're going for long-living and complex applications, you quickly run into a conflict between delivering for time or delivering for value. You think, in our case, we have applications that are over 10 years old. So that means that some of the people that contributed to that code are no longer with us. Also, functionality has been layered on top of existing functionality. So unpacking that is complex. And if you're trying to do that in some sort of like time-boxed exercise, then you understand the challenge I'm presenting to you. That's something you need to manage carefully, because you could start moving blocks of that code over into the target platform, but that may give you a false sense of progress, because yes, you're moving faster, but you're not necessarily delivering the benefits that we said at the beginning that we wanted to do as part of the transformation. So something to keep in mind. Also, something to consider is that what may look as a very valid migration path at a team level might not be what you want as an organization. So I mentioned before the analytics applications. You could have something, again, running on the same commercial database I mentioned before, and you could design to go into cloud, fully native, like all really by the book. That might still not be the design or the target state that makes sense for you as an organization. That's maybe workload that you want to move into that common data platform I mentioned before. So you have to work closely with the product teams to make sure that we don't lose sight of what are the overall benefits, and then also value those cases as you go along. Lessons learned, again, because this is very broadly formulated and can entail a lot, the recommendation here is to really bring your teams closer and make all those assumptions, make all those implications explicit. So be clear on what it is and is not part of your scope, and make sure that where you're deciding to be part of scope connects with the business benefits. Also, something else we intended to do at the beginning, and it turned out to be quite difficult, is trying to quantify all the benefits that such a transformation can deliver. Here as well, we found out that at the end, the best is to pick some that are representative of the transformation and are measurable, and use that as the core, and the remaining of them, use them to articulate the narrative that goes around the full value proposition. So if you think of infrastructure, cost, or similar KPIs that's easy to quantify and measure. If you're talking about team velocity, that's very difficult to aggregate past team level, because everybody measures story points differently, and then trying to turn that into monetary value, good luck with that. So again, just pick some that are core to the transformation, and they can even help you steer a decision of stopping it. So it has to be core, but not everything. Also, when we started, we quickly saw there was a little bit of like two camps. There were people that were super keen on trying new things that they have been seeing elsewhere, other people being successful with it. I mean, other companies, what is cloud native and all the rest. And then you will have others that they will say, because we have a performant operating platform, that they will say, look, this works, so we're actually doing a lot that is right. Why do we need to change that? And probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. You need to be open to explore those new opportunities or new design patterns, but at the end of the day, you need to write your own story. And what worked for other people doesn't necessarily need to work for you. We had one case in where we thought initially that we were going to go for microservices as everyone else, and what we have settled at the end is on a modular monolith approach that is delivering the value that we need from the transformation, but it's also letting us grow later if we need to. Last point here on the lessons learned is I talked about the service catalog and the freedom of choice that you have with public cloud, but not all of it makes the same sense. If I think of an organization of our size, having 2 SQL products, it's very hard to justify. And I would argue that you have a hard time justifying such a case, because the benefits that you will get for a specific use case are marginal comparing to the loss that you get in terms of reusability across teams, security patching that you need to do multiple products, and so on. So think wisely on when you want to use that catalog and what is it really that it moves the needle for you. And then the last one, FinOps. That's something that you should develop and bring into the organization very early. We were lucky that we started that process already with a private cloud, so we understood the relationship between capacity and cost and how you steer both. But if you're going into this journey, and also if you're going into public cloud, that's something is important to embed in your teams, because some of your designs might not turn out to do what you were expecting. And if you start having spikes on consumption, as we saw in some of the cases, you have to be able to react quick and remediate that, so that you don't necessarily need to stop things that you are moving on with. With this, and then maybe to start wrapping things up. So if you're coming from a performance environment as we do, then you might ask yourself whether that is something that is for you, and also the timing for it. And I feel there's some good reasons why you should consider it. The first one is the technology. Technology will keep changing, and we'll probably leave this conference full of ideas that we want to discuss back in our organization, and your business peers are doing the same. So I think all organizations will try to keep up with those changes that they feel that can make their business be better. And to do that, you need to have time, you need to have the engineering skills to explore those opportunities, but also the money to financially back those experiments and scale if that is something that is relevant for you. And I think we've covered today how you can use public cloud to create that space. The third reason is that the decisions that we've been very quickly going through today, they're not obvious. I think there's a lot at stake. The systems that I was showing on the examples before that are at the core of our operating platform. So there's a lot at stake, in particular if you get it wrong. So you don't want to race or rush those decisions. There's a learning process that is part of it. So if you can start a little bit earlier and start looking at things holistically, we believe that is the better approach to go about it. And that's what we did. So we started thinking, what would the future look like for us? What skills are relevant? How much capacity we should allocate to those skills? What is our tech infrastructure looking like in X years from now? And then with that, start looking beyond the actual transformation, but really actively shaping our tomorrow together with our business peers. Thank you so much, and happy to take any questions.
We get rather a lot, let's say, questions. So, and the first, I would start with, how difficult was it to create the shared vision? Did you have a whole team working on designs and getting the domains to buy in?
Yeah, so I would say it's not trivial to get the shared vision. What we did was we created an initial version with a rather smaller team. So you could think like enterprise architects, data architects, or like a smaller community. And then we started then growing and incorporating then other views into it. So with that, we made sure that we were not having blind spots, but also that we were basically involving people on ideas that were debatable, right? Rather than just having like a blank piece of paper from the beginning.
The next question is, why the push to public cloud was so soon after private cloud migration? What did you miss in private cloud?
Yeah.
I think you were touching a bit, but...
Yeah, I can just maybe to repeat. So I think we saw opportunity in infrastructure as code, so making ourselves more efficient. Service catalog as well, for we didn't cover today, but some of the innovation that we have driven after this will not be possible if we wouldn't have public cloud. And then the push was the opportunity that I was showing before, I think in particular also on optimizing infrastructure costs and creating space to do other things.
And I think to close this topic, as for the private cloud, there is question for the apps are still in private and why are still there? So what apps do you still keep in private cloud?
Yeah, so the short answer is because we haven't finished yet. But the target is that everything goes to private cloud. We might have one or the other legacy that obviously we're not going to move just for the fun of it. But the target state is everything is on private cloud and any of those flavors that I mentioned before.
Would be the integration of GenAI next step of transformation?
So those are things we're already working on. So that's also one of the reasons why the data platform is so important for us, because then we're building the GenAI capabilities on top of it. So those are things we're already looking into, yes.
Did you meet your ROI targets with this transformation?
Again, we haven't finished yet. What we did is we created individual business cases for the big transformations that we could steer, so and be also a bit more modular with the approach. And there, yes, they were meeting our targets.
What are the skill sets you need to craft tomorrow? Tricky.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a team exercise, that's for sure. So you need to have strategy skills, you need to have some program management skills, and you need to have a solid engineering base as well. I think those are the key ingredients. And as we said before, with the shared vision, you cannot run this in isolation, right? This is relevant for the whole organization, so you need to bring in your business peers as well. I don't know whether that is an additional skill, but definitely bring them in, because also the story for each of them will be different. It's not the same story for a back office type of organization as it was for our trading units.
What was the decision process when dealing with legacy and any dependencies in your architecture when moving to cloud? I think it can be like from private and then to public, like both, not specified.
Yeah, so I mean, this has different implications. I think dependencies maybe is the easier one. I think once you look at the whole landscape proactively, then you basically start putting the pieces of the puzzle together on what you're moving first. And there, where we have common dependencies on a single platform, then we make sure that all the elements are out by the time we need it to realize the financial benefits, for instance. So that's one direction. Then the other one, on more on like legacy technologies, that depends a little bit on the case. Like we were using, for instance, Angular in the private cloud, and we will continue to use it in the future. But then other technologies, as I mentioned, with the commercial databases, that's something where we're clearly walking away from. So you need to look at in those terms.
How did you manage stakeholder expectations, timelines required by the project management versus story estimations and actual delivery?
Yeah, so I think it obviously starts from the beginning once you present the case, and then you create some milestones around that. And I think the story starts changing when you start creating those proof points. I think at the beginning, obviously, the case makes sense, might be logical, but there's nothing tangible. I think once you start delivering those proof points, then it becomes even more credible. And then project management versus story estimations, I will say the same thing as with any big project, right? You need to manage the deviations that you have, make sure that you deliver on what is relevant, and that you have your critical path under control.
What was the main motivation for moving to public cloud that you used to persuade your stakeholders? Not yours, but how did you persuade the stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's around the dimensions we said before. It's the innovation, is the operational efficiency, and is the data story. I think that's around those three that we really created the case.
So, and that's the last question that we've got, and it's, are you using a multi-cloud infrastructure design, or do you have a preferred cloud provider? What was the deciding factor?
Yeah, so we use, for the application we build, we're single cloud, very clear, deciding factor, complexity, reusability. So if you think of some of the basic services you need to build to be operational, which is security, access management, as I mentioned before, patching, and so on, if you can do that in a single platform, you get scale that you wouldn't have if you go multi-cloud, plus the interconnectivity of those services as well. I think it just adds an additional layer of complexity that if you don't have a strong case for, you shouldn't get into.
So, thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
your
much.
presentation. Thank you very much for your questions.